Banu Hocam, are you here? Yes, dear guests, our conference chair is having a technical problem right now, and I'm waiting for her. Yes, our conference chair is here right now. I think we can start. Dear professors, students, and distinguished guests, welcome and good morning. My name is Mine Bertan Yılmaz. On behalf of the Kadir Has University, I would like to thank you all for your attendance. Now we are live on Kadir Has University YouTube channel. I also thank everyone who is watching us right now. We are very proud to be hosting the 9th International Conference on Conflict, Terrorism, and Society under the title of Global Crises, Media, Politics, and Environment. I would like to provide you with some information about the conference. In the next 2 days, we will have 5 sessions and a keynote speech. The last 15 minutes of each session will be allocated to Q&A interaction. Attendees can use the Q&A window to ask questions and make some contributions. Also, I would like to remind you that we will be sharing about the conference from our social media accounts. You can follow us at ICCTS Media account name and use ICCTS 2020 2021, while you are posting on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. Now, I would like to yield the floor for the Chair of Public Relations Department, Professor Banu Baybars Hawks, to make the opening speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Mine. Director, professors, colleagues, students, and distinguished guests, welcome and good morning. We are very excited this morning to host the very first online international conference of our university, and at the same time host the 9th International Conference on Conflict, Terrorism, and Society, titled Global Crisis, Media, Politics, and the Environment. Before starting, I would like to thank our rector, Professor Sandan Durukanoğlu for her support. I also would like to thank my colleagues within communication faculty for their advice and contributions to this conference. Since we started the ICCTS conference series, we focused on crucial and timely topics. And the global politics and the media environment never disappointed us in terms of finding new and interesting ones. This year's conference theme focuses on how the global crisis emerged from and result in social, political, cultural, institutional, economic, technological, and environmental changes. Before analyzing why the theme of this year's conference is important, I would like to remind you about the previous conference's themes in order to provide some information for our new attendants about the main focus points of the ICCTS since the first conference. In the first year of our conference, we explored ongoing problems and challenges regarding terrorism in a wide range of perspectives, from media to the governments, laws, and human rights, with the contributions of famous terrorism experts, Professor Yonah Alexander and Brian Michael Jenkins. The second year's conference theme was terrorism and human security. With the human security approach, we try to tackle the human dimension of terrorism, whether in the discussion of its root causes, or in crafting responses to be able to strike a fair balance between human rights and security, with the contributions of famous sociologist, Professor Emeritus Peter Waldman. The third year's conference hot debate was New Media's Effects. Under the title of New Media Politics, Conflict, Activism, and Security, we discussed new media politics from divergent perspectives in different countries, with the contributions of Professor Catherine Luther from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. The fourth year's conference theme was titled Framing Violence, Borders, Conflicts, and Identities. With our keynote, Professor Stuart Price, we tried to focus on the tension between the mobility of bodies, labor, ideas, identities, and force of borders, which were turning into violent conflicts across the globe. In the fifth year of our conference, we explored non-state actors in conflicts, conspiracies, myths, and practices by pointing out the gaining importance of non-state actors, with the contributions of Professor Ersel Aydınlı and Walid Salem. In the sixth ICCTS, Professor of Philosophy, Brian Keeley, was our keynote speaker, and we discussed culture and politics of conspiracy theories in global conflicts in a world that was under siege of post-truth politics. In the seventh ICCTS, we focused on an important theme debate: polarization, populism, and the new politics, media and communication in a changing world. In the last ICCTS, Professor Andrew Hoskins was our keynote speaker, and we focused on an important debate theme with both academic and political environment for decades, discourses and practices of othering, politics, policymaking, and media. And today, we are here for the 9th International Conference on Conflict, Terrorism, and Society. Our theme is Global Crisis, Media, Politics, and Environment. I think this title provides a continuity with a reference to our previous conference themes in terms of its possible contributions to the future of liberal democracies, transparency, human rights, civil society, and the aim of living in a peaceful society. Crises signify conflicts, danger, and chaos. Global crises, from health crisis like COVID-19 pandemic to political crisis, from war and terrorism to humanitarian disasters, represent the dark side of a globalized world. This year, the conference aims to analyze the ongoing multidimensional crisis of global world and provide interdisciplinary approaches to current global crisis. The major themes to be covered with respect to global crisis include health crisis, legal crisis, wars and terrorism, legitimacy, economic crisis, disasters, catastrophes and risks, environmental challenges, poverty, politics, security, and the role of media in crisis time, disinformation, and of course, power relations. The conference also aims to understand how global crises are spanned by and shape our global age, and how they are represented in the media. I believe that ICCTS provides an opportunity for academics to propose solutions to problems of both media and politics, and this is a vital chance for each of us. I am also happy that every year we achieve to publish a book from the selected papers of the conference, and this year will be no exception. I wish to thank Professor Lee Arts from Purdue University Northwest accepting our invitation to be our keynote speaker of the conference. Last but not least, I would like to thank my departments, namely Suncam Koçer, İrem İnceoğlu, Defne Karaosmanoğlu, Mine Bertan Yılmaz, and Beste Yıldırım for their tremendous efforts in shaping the conference every year. I also would like to thank our assistants of corporate communication and communication studies MA programs, our students who actively participated and worked, and finally, all participants of the conference for their contribution. I want to say once more, on behalf of Kadir Has University, welcome. It's a great pleasure to see you here.
Thank you very much, Professor Hawks, for this remarkable speech. Now I would like to yield the floor for Associate Dean of Communication Faculty, Associate Professor Levent Soysal. Hocam, we cannot hear you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Let me say from the beginning, my connection is a bit unstable. I hope all goes well. On behalf of the Faculty of Communication, I would like to welcome you to the 9th edition of our International Conference on Conflict, Terrorism, and Society. We are short of a year to celebrate its 10th anniversary. Although this may sound as a run-of-the-mill or wishful thinking, hopefully next year we will have a face-to-face meeting. As a faculty, we are welcoming you as a young and thriving, if I may say so, faculty of a young university with about 30 plus faculty members 500 plus students, 1,000 plus graduates, 5 departments, and master's and PhD programs. In 2023, we will celebrate our 10th anniversary. It would have been I'm back. It would have been great to host you at our historical campus at the shores of Golden Horn, but that would be a possibility after COVID. I'm not going to engage in an opening speech. Nonetheless, let me share brief thoughts on the keywords of the conference title, relevant or cliche they may be in times of COVID. Not much to say on conflict, I guess, except conflict is not a matter that needs illumination, but everyday occurrence that should be dealt with constantly and relentlessly. There seems to be nothing that could not be turned into a conflict, large or small, thanks to mediums such as Twitter, which thrives on conflict, nothing but conflict. Conflict may bring us to crisis, as in crisis management. Considering COVID as a global crisis, it may be apt to state crisis is not what it used to be. We should take it as a crisis with longevity, not a one-time happening, lingering over a year and no end in sight. It generates crises on a daily basis. No amount of crisis management in the classical PR sense could contain the crisis at hand, let alone manage it, though there are ample body of conspiracy theories that sustain them. Needless to say, some of the crises spun out of COVID are of the degree much about nothing, but they still have the capacity to occupy agendas for a few hours or days. Terrorism is a much more slippery terrain. In the movie Secret Agent, based on Conrad's novel of the same title, it is somewhat simple to figure out who the terrorist is and what the terrorist does. He is the invisible person who is run by a foreign entity to run havoc in a country by violent means. In the film, we identify the terrorist, played by Robin Williams, but the character is not identified in the credits or posters of the film, neither Robin Williams. Today, we know their names, if not in all cases, read their memoirs. Their stories fill not only political propaganda, but glossy magazines. They are as visible as can be, but who the terrorist is and what the terrorist does is no longer obvious. As Baudrillard intimates for war, in his pamphlet The Gulf War did not take place. As war is not a war, terrorism is not terrorism today. We can safely assume we all know what the society is without invoking Durkheim and others on this. I see from the conference program, you have a full agenda which promises to generate deliberation beyond the 2 days reserved for the conference. I wish you a proactive debate and express my hope for a face-to-face meeting of minds for the 10th edition of ICCTS. Thank you very much.
We thank very much, Professor Soysal, for your valuable contribution. Now we are moving on to the sessions. Today we will have 3 sessions and a keynote speech. And the session 1 is attended by 3 speakers, Keris Gerosideris, Bengü Çelenk, and Gizem Kaya. To kick off and to moderate this morning's first session, Climate Change as a Global Crisis, I would like to yield the floor for Keris Gerosideris.
Yes, hi, good morning from me. Actually, Kalimera from Greece. So are we starting our session right now here? in the main room?
Yes.
Okay, so let me share my screen. Just give me 1 second to share my screen because I have prepared like a PowerPoint for you. So can you see my PowerPoint at the moment?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So my topic is
Karis,
yes,
excuse me.
yes.
You are the moderator of the conference, and so
okay, yes. So I would like to welcome you in our climate change as a global crisis session 1. Okay, and then we are starting with my presentation: climate change emergency and the policies of environment and security as a Q methodology approach. And in our session also, we have Bengu Selek and Burak Younes, if this is right. Sorry for my pronunciation, but they are doing climate change related security concerns and critical investigation on direct effects of climate change on the US military bases. And then we have Gizen Kaya, and the topic is on environmental challenges and climate change, conflict multiplier, and mediator for peace. And then I'm doing the first presentation on climate change emergency and the policies of environmental security, a Q methodology approach. At the moment, I'm working on the University of Sheffield, and please feel free to contact me if you have any ideas based on climate change and environmental security or Q methodology. So I'm starting my presentation by, wait a second, just give me, okay. By trying to say that climate change is a global emergency from at least the beginning of 21st century, and the environment is at stake from more than a century. And then by paraphrasing Heiberg, climate change is no longer a doomsday prophecy, but it is a reality at a crisis, asking for emergency solutions. And I'm trying to give you like a bit of more on a kind of a literature review in a way, explaining environmental security, which is proposing specific solutions, but actually we are not solving the crisis or the emergency of the threat. So environmental security is an open debate in the security discipline about the appropriateness of linking climate change with security and vice versa, of course. And then it is a significant issue that there are no exact definitions and explanation of the term environmental security, which seems to link climate change and security. But in contrast, there are many different ways of seeing and analyzing the connection between these two ambiguous and amorphous concepts. So for instance, for Homer Dixon, the violent conflict due to the connection between environment and security the constructs of the scarcity and then the complexity of social and environmental actions are leading to political instability, and war and disorder could result to struggle over resources, and environmental degradation could easily create it. So he underlines that the loss of livelihood, which arises from environmental change, could lead to large-scale populations and to armed conflicts within the state. So finally, he believes that problematic conditions such as poverty, underdevelopment, and ecological collapse to violent conflict. So the explanation of the link between environment and security has methodological difficulties as it tries to explore the common areas between social and environmental systems by connecting environmental degradation to violent conflict via resources such as water. And then this is a dominant theoretical approach is based on the orthodox realistic security thinking, which always focuses on the state and its territory as a realistic referent object of security. It does not try to explore the environmental issues, and it presents these issues as a threat to state security. So as Vogler has noted, this theory explains environmental security and environmental problems only from the perspective of powerful and the developed. So The most important and interesting of this link is that all the 6 predominant approaches which exist in security discipline, including approaches of Toronto School leading by Homer Dixon, have connected climate and security based on violent conflicts, also known as environmental conflict caused by environmental degradation, which could be a threat to the state. So as Laurie Shotwack noted, almost as soon as the environment appeared on the policy map of state security apparatuses, dissenting and critics could be heard questioning the appropriateness of linking environmental issues to security practices or national security practices. And we see we have 3 different dilemmas, and that there are these critical voices that all of them have try to express these dilemmas. So the first dilemma is the connection between environment and military institutions, as the aim of military institutions is to protect the environment from the threats. This is our first dilemma. And also the second one is the dilemma that if environmental security is about protecting the environment from human activities, then it has to protect global society from economic growth and from the Western way of life, because they have proven to be major sources of environmental degradation. And finally, we have the third dilemma, which is the promotion of national security, modernization, and economic growth, which are antithetical to environmental protection. So in our case, in my studies, that's what I'm doing. I'm suggesting Q methodology, which is a mixed method study, which is commonly known and incompletely as the Q sorting technique. So Q methodology is simply a research method of extracting human subjectivity. And then in Q methodology, subjectivity means a person's communication of his or her point of view. It is a self-reference subjectivity because it presents individual remarks and imputed behavior when a person expresses his or her opinions, attitudes, perceptions, and for example, like if we say in my point of view, or I consider that. So Q methodology, invented by William Stephenson in 1935, and then even if it is that old, considered as a new and innovative strategy for conducting behavioral research, and has been applied in political communication, behavioral and health sciences, as well as in many social sciences subfields. So this research methodology is a way of analyzing human subjectivity in a structured and statistically interpretable form. And then Q has been used successfully to bridge the gap between quantitative and qualitative application in social discourses and create patterns of certain groups of individuals, and utilizes factor analysis as a statistical technique for allocating the range of these groups' discourses. This methodology provides a way to collate and correlate perspectives in order to extract from the data hidden discourses which have been held by these groups of people. So conversations, commentary, and discourses of everyday life, and we can say policies as well, on a specific topic provide the basis for a particular research which have been mentioned as the flow of communicability, which in our case in Q methodology, Q sorting technique is known as the concourse. And of course, it has like 6 steps and 6 different stages that we need to follow as researchers. And then we have to identify the area of discussion and the groups of individuals to focus on. And then we have a sample of the relevant participants share their viewpoints on issues with the investigators on our discussion. And then we are doing semi-structured interviews where the researcher is able to collect a series of statements raised by the participants rather than by him or herself. Then we have the researcher who selects the statements to use in the Q sorts. A set of statements will be ranked by the participants in this upside down pyramid, actually. And then we have the participants that they have to rank the Q sorts. And then we have the individual Q sorts, of course. And then we are using factor analysis And we extract the Q sorts for a few typical Q sorts. They are known as factors. And then we have the researcher who interprets the factors in order to extract the social discourses out of statistical analysis. And these discourses represent a new and actual way of seeing the world. And of course, in our case, why we're proposing the application of Q is to include the stakeholders' perceptions on the existing policies of environmental security, to test the relevance of the policies and the usefulness of the concept itself. And also, Q is a useful method of involving people's perspectives of a particular topic. So we can, let's say, for instance, see if there's no planet B is something that we need to have in our minds and read actually. And then we have we know that it is advantageous for the security studies to illuminate the consequences of the academic discourses in people's lives. So particularly practically connects people's discourses to the policies of security and climate change. And then is designated as a policy relevance mechanism in security studies. And the absence of a mechanism in the security studies is a major problem that both academics and practitioners face, as the field does not have evidence of supporting the policies or the inclusions or exclusions of specific actors, such as the policymakers or the public, the suggested solution policies. And Q seems to be an appropriate research method for providing feedback, both to academics and stakeholders, of policies which have been suggested or already applied. And there are at least two highly significant reasons for Q methodology being a relevant research method for analyzing security threats and matters in the field of security studies. And these are the reasons for applying this methodology for security field. So Q methodology, firstly, establishes and explores new approaches, and by that reveals to both stakeholders and updated information regarding a particular topic. So this makes it useful for expanding the general knowledge and relevance for the establishing policies. And secondly, Q includes the viewpoints of actors which have been excluded from the field of security studies and environmental security area too. Last but not least, Q methodology is starting the discussion based on particular topic or matter or concern. In our case, it's climate change and environmental security, let's say, and it is fine only theoretical, but also practical solution or policies from the actors themselves. These are some really useful bibliography and references that you can use. And of course, I'm posting here the site for Opera Subjectivity, the journal, the International Journal of Q Methodology. It's really useful for all of you if you want to apply this methodology on your studies. Thank you so much. I would like to thank you. And I think, well, I don't know if we have a lot of time, but I think it's better if we go direct to Bengus Salek and Burak Younes on climate change related security concerns, a critical investigation on direct effects of climate change on the US military bases. So thank you. That was all for me.
Hello, everyone. Could you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. First of all, it's a glad pleasure to be here with you today. I and my colleague Burak Güneş, who contributed to this presentation, would like to thank Kadir Has University and the committee members for hosting this organization. My name is Bengu and I am the PhD candidate at Kadir Has University at the Department of IR. Now I will share my screen. I think. In this presentation, we will evaluate the direct effects of climate change and their impacts on the US military bases by covering some key points. My talk in this morning is divided into three main sections. First, we will briefly touch on the security and climate change literature. Secondly, by using the national security strategy documents, because we choose these documents because these documents officially reflect the executive branch of the security concerns of the governments, and some sense of other relevant documents. We problematize whether or not climate change and national security discourses have become dominant. And finally, we plan to develop this study by addressing the direct effects of climate change and their security implications on the US military bases. In this context, we ask, how does the literature on climate change deal with the issue at hand? What are the links between climate change and security? Secondly, has the US securitized climate change as a threat to its national security? If so, can we scrutinize it by analyzing the NSS documents? I will call it NSS documents rather than the longer version. Are there any concrete examples that may support our claim that the US will inevitably securitize the issue of climate change? As I said in the beginning, we are trying to give an account of the new security threats that result from climate change. Specifically, we are trying to focus on the direct impacts of climate change over the US military installations. For evaluating the issue at hand, we are going to look at the NSS and their language. At the end of the day, we claim that the US has not securitized the climate change as an existential threat, but the US government, according to us, will inevitably have to securitize it. In this context, the first part of the presentation is climate change and security literature. Climate is a very complex system consisting of the complicated links between the atmosphere, oceans, lands, and their subdynamics. Therefore, any change in this system brings with it many uncertainties and security concerns through the direct or indirect threats. Evidence suggests that human history also met the anthropocentric, in other words, human-induced climate change for the first time. Although there are very different voices about its beginning, the Industrial Revolution is seen as the breaking point of human-induced climate change. In this regard, climate change related to security concerns have been studied under the roof of environmental security studies over the last 4 decades. However, growing climate-induced security threats regarding the social, economic, and political dimensions have made it a separate field of the study since the early 2000s. The research on climate and security relations tended to focus on threat multiplier effects, which means it exacerbates the existing problems such as food security, conflicts, economic implications, and etc., rather than the direct effects. Even though little attention is still paid to the direct effects of climate change at the national security level, increasing extreme weather events and sea level rise in recent years have caused the physical borders of states to modify. Especially we see in the countries below the sea level, such as the Pacific region. In this context, by using national security strategy documents, we will problematize whether or not climate change and national security discourses structured. First of all, the first part will give an insight into the US efforts on climate change by investigating the language used in the national security strategy documents beginning from 2002. According to the NSS 2002, the decision makers decided to recreate the concept of enemy. And the generous claims follows that the US national security strategy will be based on a distinctly American internationalism that reflects the union of our values and our national interest. So, one of the most intense questions is that, does dealing with climate change constitute one of the core values of the US? The answer, unfortunately, dealing with climate change finds a place under economic growth, which deals with a little on efforts to figure emission-based climate threats. As for the conclusion, it seems that the primary goal highlighted in the NSS 2002, as you see on the screen, that the economic parts of the climate change, overtly is the military security targeted by non-state actors. After 2002, the following NSS document was published in 2006. As for the former President George W. Bush, the war on terror was being operated with density when the NSS 2006 emerged. Therefore, the document was depicted as a wartime strategy, prioritizing the American national security concerns. But the document also touches upon the new challenges posed to US national security. Among those are pandemic health challenges, illicit trade in all forms, and environmental disasters needed to be dealt with. Although the NSS 2006 underlined the inevitability of new threats, it fails to identify underlying causal mechanisms that make natural disasters possible to emerge. After 2006, the next NSS was clarified in 2010 during the Obama's presidency. The focus of this document is threats posed by globalization. Namely, Obama tried to build up renewed leadership of America around the world by emphasizing America's soft power and uniqueness to strengthen world security. In this document, when it comes to climate security, it seems that more than a half page is devoted to this issue, and statements mainly show the exacerbate effects of climate change and offers cooperation with all nations. In addition, some targets for emission reduction have been set, but although some efforts put on to emphasize climate change, it's again taken as an phenomenon of national security. According to the NSS 2015, it seems that an awareness has risen, but still not enough to handle climate change-related security concerns. The US government was aware of the fact, stating that climate change is an urgent and growing threat to our national security, contributing to increased natural disasters, refugee flows, and conflict over basic resources like food and water. This means that the US government began to understand underlying causal mechanisms that climate change has and what it can lead to happen. Also, the direct effects of climate change are included in this document for the first time. For instance, you see on the screen that the present day effects of climate change are being felt from the Arctic to Middle West. Increased sea levels and storm surges threaten coastal regions, infrastructure, and property. In turn, the global economy suffers, compounding the growing cost of preparing and restoring infrastructure. At this point, we should ask what kinds of infrastructure we are talking about, or are military bases counted in? As for us, the answer should be yes, because climate change is counted as one of the security priorities for the US in these documents. The last NSS was published in 2017 during the Trump's administration. Trump was a leader who didn't believe in climate change. He didn't hesitate to state this in many of his statements. Therefore, climate change and related security concerns were not included, but it touched upon the ones in the energy security. Today, Biden is a very new leader, but climate change and related security issues have been the main topic of his agenda, both in his election campaigns and after he became a president. On the 27th of January in 2021, he gave a briefing and emphasized that climate change is an existential threat and thus signaled that this issue could be securitized. As you see on the screen that he called this climate change is an existential threat, and this means that this problem should be securitized. And also, he refers to the Defense of Department's reports and strengthen his mentions. So far, we have tried to understand how climate change is structured in the US national security strategies documents. It seems that climate change was not clearly seen as a national security issue until the Biden's presidency. Because when I researched on the Obama's presidency, I saw one document from government that they criticized Obama's being Obama focusing on more international security rather than the national security in the context of climate change. Although this discourse gained an importance during Obama's presidency, it seems that his discourses generally took shape in global dimensions. The new NSS has not yet been published during the Biden's period, but it's understood from his statements that he accepts climate change as a national security issue and shapes his discourses in terms of military bases as well. As you see on the screen that he refers to the military installations. So our case study is related to military bases. And I ask, what is the status of military bases? What is the relationship between climate change and geopolitically important bases? Is the impact of climate change on military bases really a threat to the US national security? In this context, one of the most comprehensive reports on the impact of climate change on military bases was published by the Ministry of Defense in 2009. The Department of Defense, to prepare this report, Department of Defense asked 79 military bases to analyze climate-related security issues in the sense of flooding, drought, desertification, wildfires, and permafrost that are likely to occur over the next 20 years according to their operational roles. As is seen on the table that flooding, drought, and wildfires are the most serious threat to the Air Force, Army, and Navy services. In the same year, according to the Department of Defense report, the United Military manages property in all 50 states, 7 US territories, and 40 foreign countries comprising almost 300,000 individual buildings around the globe. These buildings are valued at $590 billion. Another report is highlighted that recent studies have found that the military is not prepared to meet this threat. Also, the US Congressional Budget Office report in 2019, in the same year, supported this idea that bases in extremely hot and dry, extremely cold and snowy climates were associated with annual base operation costs that were about 27% higher than costs at bases with more moderate climates. At this point, I will try to give a clearer picture of the extent of the threat by analyzing a few geostrategically important bases both in home and abroad. As you see on the map, the installations that appear blue on the map are those threatened by sea level rise and flooding. The red ones are threatened by excessive heat. The orange points are threatened by drought and wildfire. Green is the flash flooding. As you see that the east coast are under threat of sea level rise and flooding, while the west is in danger of extreme temperatures, drought, wildfire, and flooding. When we come to the abroad, we choose 3 points which are worstly affected by climate change. The first one is US Naval Support Facility Diego Garcia. Diego Garcia is a critical logistic hub for the US and the UK militaries in the Middle East. It provides logistic support and to operational forces forward deployed to Indian Ocean and Persian Gulf areas. And the most of Garcia is 6.5 feet above sea levels and threatened from sea level rise as well as intense of storms and storm surges. You can see the military bases at Diego Garcia. The second one is naval base at Guam, one of the most strategically important US bases in the Western Pacific Ocean because it is one of the closest bases to North Korea. The sea level has risen by about 4 inches relative to 1993. and islands is like to see a 1 to 3 feet rise in 100 years. So the tropical storm region, leaving it vulnerable to intense storm surges. Al Udeid Air Base at Qatar is the largest US base in the Middle East and home to US Combined Air Operations, Air Forces, Special Operations Command Central. And if the global warming continues at this current pace, the Arabian Peninsula could be too hot and humid for humans to survive outdoors in 100 years. However, Qatar put some air conditions in the outdoors. It doesn't matter for the US military capabilities because the equipments and other things is not work with air conditions. In conclusion, US has enjoyed, we know that US has enjoyed global military dominance for decades, and now Biden is aware of the vulnerability of military bases to climate change. Therefore, in the face of climate-related threats, it seems that he will probably require a serious securitization effort in terms of the new strategic plans. Thanks for your listening. Thank you.
So thank you so much. Thank you so much for your presentation. And I think that now we can go to Zem Kaya on environmental challenges and climate change conflict as a multiplier or mediator for peace.
Hello, everyone. I am Gizem Kaya. I am a MA student in International Relations at Kadir Has University. Before starting, I would like to thank the organization committee for giving me this opportunity. Outline of my presentation is I will start with my research questions, and then I will introduce these two broad literature actually with their criticism. And then I will particularly focus on the role of environmental related issues in the Colombian peace process. And I will introduce my methodology, and I will conclude this presentation. My main research question is, how do environmental challenges and climate change affect post-conflict process in Colombia? However, due to some limitations, like getting public view, I will focus on, in the scope of this study, I will focus on how the environment-related issues are portrayed in the Colombian peace agreement. Environmental issues emerged on the international political agenda in early 1970s, and these issues mostly covered the conflict between wealthy and poor people and environmental consequences of war. At the 1970s, 1980s, security concept has broadened and environmental component was added in security area. However, environmental issues were first identified as a potential cause of violent conflict by 1987 Brundtland report. Since then, environmental degradation, climate change, and natural resources have been widely studied in terms of their likely risk over conflict. These studies accepted environmental challenges and natural resources as conflict multipliers. As Homer-Dixon argues that environmental scarcity causes violent conflict, especially scarcities in cropland, water, forest, and fish, can cause violence among nations. According to International Panel on Climate Change, heat waves, flooding, storms, and drought can cause famine and population displacement. Disease and a decline in the agricultural productivity of rural areas may accelerate migration to the cities. When we look at this map, we see that the location of armed conflict and drought is matched actually in Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, and Mexico and Colombia. When we look at the criticism over conflict multiplier literature, actually, there is no direct relation between environment and conflict. There is a lack of causal mechanism and difficult to establish general relationship between these phenomena, and this literature ignores technological change, political and economic factors, and how the regime type affects such conflicts is an understatement. Studies on the relationship between violent conflict and climate change mainly focus on Africa. And as Tobias Ide stated that there's a streetlight effect. I mean, there's a sampling bias. We see that most frequently mentioned continents and world regions in climate conflict publications, Africa in the first line, actually with the 77 papers. However, starting from 2000, environmental peace building literature emerged. Actually, it represents a paradigm shift from the environmental scarcity to the environmental peace. This literature accepts environmental challenges and climate change and disaster as incentives for cooperation and peace rather than conflict and competition. This literature initially start with Conca and Dabalco pioneered work, which name is Environmental Peacemaking. And this book actually focused on the shared natural resources as a conflict resolution tool. Environmental peace building literature actually has two strands. First one is focus on after interstate conflicts, and it claims that cooperation over environmental challenges can bring sustainable peace, and it shows spillover effects on other areas like political and economic. But when we look at the after interstate conflicts, natural resource management stands out. There are also some criticism on environmental peace building literature. First one is initial studies were overly focused on the interstate dimension and water-related issues. It ignores the cooperation aspect after interstate conflict. And after civil wars, it includes only natural resource management, and it ignores the environmental aspect. This literature is dominated by top-down approach, and whether environmental peace building brings positive peace or not is not based on empirical evidence. And gender aspect, the role of new technologies should take into account also. When we look at the environmental related issues in the Colombian peace process, Colombia witnessed more than 5 decades of armed conflict, and the environment and natural resources played a significant role during the armed conflict and also onset of the armed conflict. As Rustad and Binningspo posits that any armed conflict having a natural resource linkage more likely to conflict drop within 5 years. The role of natural resources does not end when peace comes. In the global crisis, climate change and environmental disasters can deepen already existed fragilities in post-conflict Colombia. We are seeing this photograph actually. When we look at the role of the natural resources, these issues cover land-related issues, cocoa production, illegal mining, and environmental issues also include deforestation, drought, and desertification. Right now I will introduce my methodology. Actually, I am planning to focus on the Colombian Peace Agreement, and I will extract environment, resource, and climate-related sentences from this agreement. And I will use some computational social science methods, and I will use R programming language and clean this data in R. And I will do quantitative text analysis and sentiment analysis. To do sentiment analysis, I plan to use Bing and NRC sentiment dictionaries in R. The aim is to understand how the environment and resource related issues perceived in the peace context. I actually extracted 66 sentences that include environment-related words from the Colombian peace agreement. And then I worked on these sentences in R, and I did a word frequency table, which included sentences. And we see communities is used more than 30 times. And also rural, social areas, rights, cultural, economic words are used more than 20. However, we see two negative words in this table, conflict and illicit, also are used more than 10 times. And I separated these words in terms of negative words and positive words. When we look at this word cloud, actually we see conflict and illicit and poverty, problem, vulnerable as a negative words in the peace agreement. But when we look at the positive ones, sustainability, well, protection, guarantee, stand out. In terms of sentiment analysis, I use NRC dictionary, and we see that positive words actually like guarantee, agreement, respect, strengthening are have a great number. Yep. So overall, when we look at this bar plot, we see that trust-related words actually approximately are 150 words, and however, fear follow these trust-related words actually. And my expected findings. Frequency analysis can present us with a detailed picture of the most important words related to the environment and resource issues. Sentiment analysis can contribute to the understanding that how environmental related issues are framed in the peace agreement. Even if the Colombian peace accords preliminary findings related to the environment included words show positivity, it may not be the same from the Colombian public eyes. And the way the environment-related issues are described in the peace accord can provide us the government perspective. However, as I said before, there is a need for bottom-up approach that includes public view on environmental issues. We cannot analyze these two perspectives properly by obtaining the public view. And it also paves the way to learn the main obstacles to sustainable peace. Social media, and particularly Twitter, can provide a vivid research environment to reach a public opinion. However, there are some challenges to get historical data on Twitter, especially for young scholars related to Twitter academic API related issues. And my last words, environmental challenges and climate change maintain to be the most critical factors for the Colombian post-conflict process, and it should take into account by adding public views as well. Thank you for listening me.
So thank you so much. That was the end for our session 1, Climate Change as a Global Crisis. I think that we can start our Q&A session if you have any questions for all of us. So I guess there are no questions. I'm meant for asking any question if you have any.
So, okay, we would like to thank our speakers and the moderator for this informative session. Dear guests, now we will have a 1 hour and 20 minutes break. Then we will continue with the second session. We are going to close the event now. Please be here 5 minutes before the next session starts. You can come back at exactly 1:25.
Thank you much. Thank you.
Thank you.